Welcome back, Grade 12 2021. Still Mr. Ross, HH High School in Somerset West. Tonight, we are speaking about civil society protests, civil rights protests in the United States of America between the 1950s to the 1970s. But this time, we're not doing source-based, we're doing the essay. In the past, until last year, for the past 3-4 years, this was a source-based question, the Black Power movement. From this year, for the next few years, this will be the essay. But now you must be very careful. This can be asked in 3 or 4 different ways. But we are going to look specifically in this essay that I'm going to do with you at the role of Malcolm X. Now, Malcolm X is an icon in black history. And so we're going to look at a question that says, more than any other individual, Malcolm X's ideas inspired the Black Power movement. Evaluate this statement with reference to the ideas and actions of the Black Power movement in the United States of America during the 1960s. Now, you sit with a dilemma. The topic says between the 50s and the 70s, but the question concentrates on the actions taking place in the 60s. So you can't go beyond and you can't go before the 60s. You need to concentrate exclusively on what has happened in the 1960s. So Malcolm X, this is my sort of introduction. Malcolm X was a brilliant individual whose philosophies and ideas inspired a generation of African Americans, especially the youth, to believe in themselves, stand up for themselves, and form organizations and movements to help them achieve their goals and ideals during the 1960s. We have just contextualized the question. And whatever you do after this must follow that same line of argument. So you'll have to explain how his ideas and philosophies inspired black people to stand up for themselves and to change the United States of America. So what was the ideas of Malcolm X that gave rise to the Black Power movement? This will be your second paragraph. So you have to leave a line open. Remember again, I'm going to continue to reiterate this. You are not allowed to write headings. So you just need to go into the next paragraph. So what was the ideas of Malcolm X that gave rise to the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party? Malcolm X believed in a policy of self-defense instead of non-violence. So here is a little difference between what Martin Luther King believed and what Malcolm X believed. Martin Luther King believed in non-violence. Malcolm X believed in self-defense. Self-defense would in most cases include violence. So there is a slight difference. But here we're not talking about Martin Luther King at all. He's just concentrating on Malcolm X. So he believed in self-defense instead of non-violent protests that were followed by the civil rights movement. He also advocated black nationalism instead of non-racialism. Again, a difference from the civil rights movement. Black nationalism instead of non-racialism, as well as black separatism instead of integration. He famously spoke of coffee losing its strength when milk was added, implying that black and white Americans should remain separate. Did you get it right? He said that coffee loses its strength when milk was added. So he was totally against integration. As a man, he believed in revolution instead of reform. So Malcolm X did not believe that the country should be reformed and that you should use what is there and then add stuff or change it a little bit. He believed in a total overthrowing of the system and starting a new system. Malcolm X believed in revolution instead of reform. He believed that society needed to be radically transformed. He was an important speaker for the Nation of Islam. It was a movement, and he split from this movement in 1964, although he kept the religion that he adopted, the religion of Islam. The Nation of Islam encouraged black Americans to reclaim their African heritage and value their culture and religion. Malcolm encouraged black people to be proud of who they were and of their culture and where they come from. He highlighted the problems that the inner cities had, and he became a role model for thousands and thousands of young black Americans, and they followed him like religiously. At the time of his death in 1965, the ideas of Malcolm X were still changing. Now, you must understand it. Malcolm X's ideas was not cast in stone and iron, because it's ideas. It's not something static. So ideas changed as the person grew into the idea. And that is what has happened to Malcolm X. When he was with the Nation of Islam, he was very rigid in his thinking. When he left the Nation of Islam because he was upset with the leader and what the leader stood for, he changed how he looked at the world. At first, Malcolm X was totally against any negotiations or talks with white people and other organizations and Christian organizations and whatever organizations. After he left the Nation of Islam, he opened himself up for conversation with people of all races and status in America to advance the cause of black Americans. So he encouraged them to be proud to be black. He highlighted their problems and he became a leader. He was becoming more socialist and spoke about organizing poor black and poor white people. So now it was not only about black anymore. And this was a shift from his original policy of separatism, where he believed in no integration. So Malcolm X has grown a lot as a leader, and that made him probably one of the biggest icons of American history. So the ideas of Malcolm X inspired other people. For instance, Stokely Carmichael, who became the first activist to use the slogan Black Power Now, he was inspired by Malcolm X. He was inspired by what he's heard of Malcolm X. And for a while, he was also part, Stokely Carmichael, of the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee. But he split with them over their policy of nonviolent protest. So the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee that were led by Martin Luther King, they believed in nonviolence. As Stokely Carmichael became more and more inspired by Malcolm X, he changed his views on nonviolence, and so he split from this organization, and he withdrew his support for the civil rights movement. He argued that blacks must organize separately, and Carmichael therefore joined the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So he is now following Malcolm X and the ideas of Malcolm X. He later converted to Islam like Malcolm X, and he moved to Africa. The ideas of Malcolm X in particular inspired the formation of the Black Panther Party. Now, what was the Black Panther Party? Two gentlemen, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, were influenced by the ideas of Malcolm X about self-defense, and they established armed patrols to protect the black community from police brutality, calling it the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Like Malcolm X, they argued that black people must organize themselves and not wait on white people to make decisions for them. So they would organize themselves and organize their own communities, even the safety in their communities, so that black police, white police don't have to come into their communities. They started a lot of different projects, welfare projects, feeding schemes, clinics for black children, where people, and for free clinics for black people, food parcels. They handed out food parcels to poor black Americans. So the Black Panther Party were much more than what their name said, self-defense. They didn't only do self-defense, they helped people, they uplifted people, not only in spirit, but physically. They would help people. So they further encouraged people, black people, to be taught about African American history, black history. So instead of going to school and just learn the white American history, they also learned, or they taught people, black African American history. They further encouraged black people to see themselves as African American and to be proud of their African heritage and their culture. So Malcolm X was, however, not where the influence of the Black Power movement stopped. There were other influences, so we tend to forget that other people also had influence on the Black Power movement. Other influence of the Black Power movement were the writings of Frantz Fanon, the liberation movements in Africa, and its leaders such as Kenneth Nkrumah, Nyerere, and also Mandela, as well as Asian national movements and leaders like Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, in North Vietnam, Mao Zedong in China. And so a lot of the Black Power movement's policies were very socialist. and sometimes communist because of the influence of all these different leaders. It is, however, clear, and this will be where you will end off with your essay if you're only going to speak on the ideas of Malcolm X. It is, however, clear that Malcolm X during the 1960s hugely influenced the Black Panther Party and the Black Power movement, but there were other influences and figures and people that influenced them and programs we cannot deny. And this helped to inspire African Americans to fight for their rights and their freedom. I thank you. Okay, what you must understand is that this is one form of essay that can be asked. Now, the Black Power movement and Malcolm X, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, it's a very interesting part of American history. So what I've noticed going through a few question papers is that there is different ways that they can ask this question. They can ask you to talk about the successes of the Black Power movement. Then you need to tell us how successful were this party, what did they achieve in the United States of America, what did they do differently than the civil rights movement. So the focus will change slightly. So please go read up on the successes of the Black Power movement and the ideas of Malcolm X combined with it. There is a third way they can ask this question. They can ask you to talk about the 10-point plan that the Black Power movement had or the Black Panther Party had. And so the focus there can also be a little different. So what I'm going to do with my kids at school, I'm going to integrate the 3 possible essays to one. So whatever essay then asked, they ask, you will be able to answer. So you need to sit with your teacher, take what I just did as an essay as a basis for a broader and a bigger and a more inclusive essay where you can bring in the other ideas that I just spoke about. Don't limit yourself to a specific essay when we do essays on these videos. The essays I'm doing is like backbone, but remember they can ask the essay slightly differently. I thank you.